My name is Claire Donovan, and I was 34 years old when my family decided it would be easier if I simply didn't exist for a while. It didn't come with shouting, no slammed doors, no dramatic goodbye, just one short phone call and a sentence that erased me. Don't come home this year. Your brother can't handle tension right now. That was it. No explanation, no discussion, no apology, just a quiet decision made without me, about me. At the time, I didn't know that sentence would eventually lead to a wedding, a public reckoning, and a moment where the truth would be said out loud in front of everyone who needed to hear it. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to the call. It was December 18th, a Tuesday afternoon, 4 days before Christmas. I remember because my apartment smelled like pine cleaner and burnt toast, and I was standing barefoot on cold tile, staring at a half-packed suitcase that had been sitting open for 3 days. I had already wrapped the gifts, matching scarves for my parents, a Lego set for my nephew, a book my brother had casually mentioned 6 months earlier and probably forgotten about. I'd even bought train tickets, non-refundable. My phone buzzed on the counter. Mom. I smiled when I picked up. Hey, Mom, I was just... Claire. Her voice was clipped, careful, the voice she used when she'd already made up her mind. My stomach tightened. What's wrong? I asked. Is Dad okay? Your father's fine, she said quickly. Then she paused. That pause mattered. I need you not to come home for Christmas. I laughed, a short, confused sound. What do you mean not come home? Another pause, longer this time. Ryan's been having a hard time, she said. He's overwhelmed. He doesn't need any tension. Tension. That word had followed me my entire life like a bad reputation I could never shake. Tension? I repeated. I haven't even spoken to Ryan since September. And that's how it should stay, she said sharply. You know how things get when you're around. There it was, the familiar shape of blame, slid gently onto my shoulders like it always was. How I get? My voice cracked despite my best effort. Mom, all I did last time was ask why I wasn't invited to his birthday dinner. She sighed, not tired, annoyed. You always do this, she said. You turn everything into a confrontation. I stood there, staring at the suitcase like it belonged to someone else. I already bought my ticket, I said quietly. Well, she replied without hesitation, see if you can get a refund. And then, as if to soften the blow, she added, you understand, right? This is just about keeping the peace. Keeping the peace. The line went dead. I stayed standing in my kitchen long after the call ended. The phone screen went dark. The refrigerator hummed. Somewhere outside, a car alarm chirped and stopped. Nothing else changed, except everything. I sat down on the floor next to my suitcase and laughed again, this time without humor. 34 years old, and once again, I was the easiest thing to remove from the equation. I wish I could say this was new. It wasn't. As I sat there, memories came back in sharp, uninvited flashes. When I was 12 and got cast as the lead in the school play, opening night, I searched the audience from the stage lights. 2 empty seats. Ryan had a soccer tournament, out of town. Couldn't miss it. When I graduated college, first in my family, my parents arrived late. Ryan had car trouble and needed help. When I moved cities for work and asked if they'd come help me settle in, it's just not a good weekend for us, Mom had said. Ryan's feeling anxious. Ryan always felt anxious. Ryan always needed support. And somehow, that always meant I needed to step back. Don't be so sensitive. Why do you always make things uncomfortable? Can't you just let things go? I learned early that if I swallowed my feelings fast enough, no one accused me of ruining anything. So I did, for years. Sitting on that cold kitchen floor, something finally clicked. There was no version of me quiet enough, no tone soft enough, no silence deep enough. I was never going to be easy enough to keep. I called my father. I don't know why. Hope, maybe. Habit. The phone rang 4 times before he answered. Hey, kid, he said, like everything was normal. Did Mom tell you? A pause. I heard, he said carefully. And you're okay with it? Silence again. I could hear the TV in the background. A sports announcer, cheering. Life continuing. She's just trying to keep things calm, he said. You know how your brother is. I closed my eyes. "Dad," I said, "do you want me there?" That question hung between us. 10 seconds passed, maybe more. Then he cleared his throat. "I think it's better if you give them some space this year." Space. That was the word he chose. Something inside me went very still. Not angry, not sad, just empty. "Okay," I said. "Claire," he started, "don't take this the wrong way," but I had already ended the call. He didn't call back. That night, I unpacked my suitcase. Not dramatically. I folded each item and put it back in the drawer. The scarves, the Lego set, the book. I stacked the wrapped gifts in the back of my closet like evidence from a life that no longer applied to me. Then I sat on my couch and stared at the wall until it got dark. My phone stayed silent. No follow-up. No, "Are you okay?" No, "We'll miss you." Nothing. The next morning, I made coffee and opened Instagram. That was a mistake. There it was, a photo from my mother's account, the family living room, the Christmas tree already lit, my parents on the couch, Ryan beside them, smiling, his arm around his wife. The caption read, "So grateful for family this season." I zoomed in without meaning to, counted the seats, 4 adults, no empty space. They hadn't just excluded me, they'd rearranged the picture so it looked complete without me. I closed the app. I didn't cry, I just felt tired. By the afternoon, a quiet decision settled in. If I wasn't welcome at their table, I wasn't going to beg for a chair anymore. I didn't know what that meant yet. I just knew I wasn't going to sit alone in my apartment pretending this didn't hurt. Christmas Eve was coming, and I wasn't going to disappear quietly again. Christmas Eve arrived quietly. No dramatic snowfall, no music swelling in the background, just a gray morning and the sound of my upstairs neighbors dragging a tree up the stairwell. I lay in bed longer than usual, staring at the ceiling while the radiator clicked and hissed like it was trying to start a conversation I didn't want to have. For a few seconds, I forgot. Then it came back. The call, the sentence. "Don't come home this year." I reached for my phone without thinking. No notifications, no Merry Christmas, no family group chat, no accidental text meant for someone else. Nothing. I rolled onto my side and pressed my face into the pillow, breathing in detergent and fabric softener, grounding myself in something neutral. "Okay," I whispered to no one. "Okay." I made coffee and burned the toast. Not badly, just enough to make the kitchen smell faintly bitter. I ate it anyway, standing at the counter, scrolling through my phone like I was looking for something to punish myself with. Instagram first. More photos. My parents' tree. Ryan's son opening presents early. Matching pajamas. I noticed details I'd never paid attention to before. The angle of the camera. Who stood closest to who. How natural it looked. Like I'd never belonged there in the first place. I locked my phone and set it face down. By noon, the apartment felt too small. Every surface reminded me that I was alone on a day designed to be shared. The couch where couples usually sat together, the dining table with one chair pushed in, the silence between sounds. I tried to distract myself. Laundry, dishes, a half-hearted attempt to clean out a drawer. Nothing stuck. Around 2 o'clock, I realized I hadn't spoken out loud all day. The sound of my own voice startled me when I tested it. "Hi," I said to the empty room. It echoed wrong. I considered staying in, ordering delivery, eating in sweatpants, letting the day pass like an unwanted appointment. But something inside me resisted. Not anger, refusal. I wasn't going to sit here and let them define how small my world was allowed to be. If I was going to eat Christmas dinner alone, I was going to do it somewhere with light, with people, with movement. Somewhere my loneliness wouldn't be the loudest thing in the room. I put on my coat. The streets were quieter than usual. Most stores were closed. Windows glowed warmly behind curtains. Laughter drifted through open doorways as people came and went, arms full of wrapped boxes and casserole dishes. I walked past houses that looked like postcards. Perfect wreaths, candles in the windows, families gathered around tables I would never sit at. I told myself not to stare. I kept walking. I almost turned back twice. Once when I passed a restaurant with a "closed for the holidays" taped to the door. Once when I realized how ridiculous it felt to be wandering around on Christmas Eve with no plan and nowhere to be. Then I saw the sign. Open. A small bistro tucked between a bookstore and a hardware shop. Warm light spilled onto the sidewalk. I could see movement inside. People. I took a breath and went in. The warmth hit me immediately. Heat. Smell of roasted meat and bread. Low voices layered over soft music. The host looked up and smiled automatically. "Just one?" he asked. "Just one." "Yes," I said, forcing my voice steady. He led me to a small table near the window, not quite in the corner, but close enough to feel separate. As I sat down, I noticed them, the family at the long table beside me. 3 generations easily, an older couple at the center, 2 adult children with spouses, grandkids weaving between chairs. They were loud in the way happy families are loud, not obnoxious, comfortable. They passed plates without asking, interrupted each other mid-sentence, argued gently about who made the potatoes last year. I tried not to listen. I failed. My server arrived with a menu and a polite smile. "Christmas special?" she asked. "Sure," I said. She set down a basket of bread and moved on. I tore off a piece and ate it too quickly, barely tasting it. The family next to me burst into laughter. Someone had told a joke. The older man slapped the table, wheezing. One of the kids groaned dramatically. I felt something twist in my chest. Not jealousy, longing. "That's not a tired face," she said gently. I swallowed. "I didn't mean to stare," she continued, "but no one should cry alone on Christmas Eve if they don't have to." I opened my mouth to refuse. She smiled before I could. "Come sit with us," she said. "We have too much food and not enough sense." Behind her, the older man looked over. "She's not joking," he called. We ordered like we were feeding a small army. A younger man, sitting near the end of the table, glanced over and gave me an apologetic smile. "She won't take no for an answer," he added. I looked at my plate, at my untouched food, at the empty chair across from me. Then I looked at her again, at the way she waited without pressure. "Okay," I heard myself say. Her smile widened. "Good," she said. "I'm Marianne." She reached out her hand like this was the most normal thing in the world. I took it. "I'm Claire." "Well, Claire," she said, already turning back toward her table. "You're with us now." My food arrived. Turkey, mashed potatoes, gravy carefully poured in a neat circle. It looked perfect. I stared at it like it might say something. I took a bite. Nothing. The taste barely registered. I pushed the food around my plate, arranging it without meaning to, creating small spaces where things should be. An empty chair, an empty space. I felt my eyes burn. "No," I whispered, more to myself than anything else. I turned toward the window, pretending to be absorbed in the street outside. My napkin came up automatically. I pressed it to my face, willing the tears to stop before they turned into something noticeable. I breathed slowly. In, out. Then I heard a voice, soft, close. "Are you okay, sweetheart?" I froze. I turned slowly. The older woman from the family table stood beside me, silver hair pulled back neatly, kind eyes that didn't rush. "I'm fine," I said quickly, "just tired." She studied me for half a second longer than polite. They made room without fuss. A chair appeared, a plate was slid in front of me. Someone refilled my water. "I'm George," the older man said, shaking my hand firmly. "Our kids are Daniel and Lena, grandkids everywhere." The younger man who'd smiled earlier leaned forward. "I'm Ethan," he said. "Welcome to the chaos." The kids stared at me with open curiosity. "Who are you?" one of them asked bluntly. "Someone who needed dinner," Marianne replied smoothly. That seemed to satisfy them. Conversation resumed like I'd always been there. Someone asked what I did for work. Someone else passed me a bowl of potatoes. A child spilled juice and everyone laughed. I laughed too. It surprised me. The sound felt rusty but real. I didn't know it then, but this table, this moment, this small act of kindness from strangers, it was about to change the direction of my life.
I stayed at that table for 3 hours. Not because anyone insisted, because no one rushed me. After dessert arrived, the kids grew restless and started sliding under the table, playing some complicated game that involved shoes and imaginary monsters. Plates were pushed aside, coffee appeared. Someone ordered pie, just in case. I kept waiting for the moment where I'd feel like an inconvenience. It never came. When the check arrived, I reached for my wallet automatically. George waved me off without even looking at me. "Don't insult us," he said. "It's Christmas." "I can't let you." "You can," Marianne said, placing her hand gently over mine. "And you will." Her touch was warm, casual, familiar in a way that startled me. No one had touched my hand like that in years. As we put on our coats near the door, Marianne pressed a small card into my palm. Cream-colored, simple font. Her name, a phone number, an address. "If you ever feel like talking," she said, lowering her voice, "you call me. I mean it." George zipped his coat and nodded toward me. "We do Sunday dinners," he added, "every week. No pressure, just food and noise." I laughed nervously. "That's really kind," I said, "but I don't want to intrude." Marianne tilted her head. "You're not intruding," she said. "You were invited." Ethan lingered near the door, hands in his pockets. "She really does mean it," he said. "We don't invite people we don't want around." I nodded, not trusting myself to say anything else. Outside, the cold air hit my face sharply. Snow had started to fall, light and slow. I stood there watching them walk away together, their silhouettes blending into one another like they belonged in the same frame. I had no idea I'd just met the people who would change my definition of family. I didn't go to Sunday dinner the next week, or the week after that. Every Sunday afternoon, my phone buzzed. "Marianne. Hope you're having a good day. No pressure, just wanted to say hi. We made too much soup again." I typed replies and deleted them. "Thank you, but I'm busy. Maybe another time." I wasn't busy. I was scared. Scared of getting used to something I didn't deserve. Scared of mistaking kindness for permanence. Scared of needing them. By the third week, guilt started to creep in. What kind of person keeps accepting invitations and never shows up? What if they thought I was ungrateful? What if they stopped asking? That thought hurt more than I expected. So one Sunday, just after 4, I stood in front of their address, a house with a wraparound porch, lights glowing in every window. I stood there for a full 5 minutes before knocking. Marianne opened the door like she'd been waiting. "There you are," she said, smiling. She pulled me into a hug before I could react. Not tight, not dramatic, just present. "We saved you a seat," she said. The house smelled like garlic and bread. Voices overlapped from the kitchen. A game show played faintly in the background. I hovered awkwardly in the entryway, unsure where to put my coat. Ethan appeared beside me and took it without asking. "Hooks are over there," he said. "Shoes anywhere." Shoes anywhere. That small freedom nearly undid me. At the table, everyone made space naturally. No announcement, no explanation. Just a chair pulled out like it had always been there. Conversation flowed around me. Work stories, neighbor gossip, an argument about whether pineapple belonged on pizza. Someone asked my opinion. I froze, then answered. No one dismissed it. No one corrected me. They listened. That first dinner, I barely ate. I was too busy watching. How George always served Marianne first. How Marianne noticed when someone went quiet. How Ethan refilled water glasses without being asked. It wasn't perfect. People interrupted each other. A kid spilled sauce on the tablecloth. George burned the garlic bread slightly. But no one treated it like a failure. They just adjusted. I left that night with leftovers wrapped carefully in foil and a strange heaviness in my chest. Not sadness, something closer to grief. Sunday dinners became a pattern, then a rhythm. Each week, I told myself it was temporary. Each week, they treated me like it wasn't. Marianne texted midweek just to check in. George asked about my job and remembered details. Ethan walked me to my car every time, even when it was cold. "You don't have to," I told him once. "I know," he said. "I want to." That sentence followed me home. With time came doubt. Late at night, lying in bed, questions crept in. What happens when they realize I'm not worth the effort? What if I say the wrong thing? What if I disappoint them? I caught myself editing my personality, laughing less loudly, apologizing too quickly, offering to help before being asked. Old habits resurfacing. One night, Marianne noticed. She sat beside me after dinner, her voice low. "You don't need to audition here," she said. I blinked. "I'm not." "Yes, you are," she said gently. "I see it. You make yourself smaller when you're nervous." My throat tightened. "I don't want to mess this up," I admitted. She smiled softly. "You won't," she said. "And even if you do, we'll talk about it. That's how families work." Families. The word landed differently this time. As winter turned to spring, I realized something quietly terrifying. I stopped checking my phone on Sundays. I stopped wondering if my parents would call. I stopped measuring myself against their silence. For the first time, my emotional center wasn't waiting on someone else's approval. It scared me, because if this was real, then what I'd lost before had never been. One evening, as I helped Marianne dry dishes, she said casually, "You know, you're always welcome here. Not just Sundays." I nodded, pretending that sentence didn't rearrange my insides. Ethan passed by and smiled at me, and for the first time, I let myself imagine a future that wasn't built around absence. I didn't know where this was going, but I knew one thing for certain. I was no longer eating alone. And that was just the beginning. At some point, I stopped pretending Ethan was just another person at the table. I didn't tell myself that directly. I told myself smaller lies. He was just polite. He was just like that with everyone. This was just proximity, not meaning. But my body knew before my mind did. The way I noticed when he wasn't there yet. The way I relaxed when he sat down across from me. The way my attention tilted toward him without effort. Nothing happened all at once. That was the problem. It started with conversation. Long ones. After dinner, when the kids disappeared into another room, and George turned on the news too loud. Ethan and I would sit at the end of the table, plates pushed aside, talking about things that didn't feel dangerous. Work, books, movies we loved but never admitted publicly. Then, slowly, the edges softened. He asked where I grew up. I gave him the short version. He asked about my parents. I deflected. He didn't push. That made it worse. One night, as he walked me to my car, he said, "You know you don't owe us anything, right?" I laughed nervously. "I know." "No," he said gently. "I don't think you do." I stopped walking. "What makes you say that?" He shrugged. "You say thank you like it's an apology." The words hit too close. "I'm just grateful," I said. "I know," he replied, "but you don't have to earn being here." I unlocked my car and sat inside without turning it on. "I'm not very good at staying," I admitted quietly. He nodded. "Yeah, I figured." Not judgment. Recognition. That night, I lay awake replaying the conversation. Staying. The word felt heavy. In my family, staying was conditional. Staying meant being quiet. Staying meant not asking questions. Staying meant accepting whatever version of love was offered. Anything else was too much. I had learned to leave before I could be left. Even now, surrounded by people who treated me kindly, part of me stayed half-packed, just in case. Spring came slowly. Sunday dinners moved outside, windows opened, laughter carried farther. Ethan started texting me during the week. Nothing intense. A photo of something ridiculous he'd seen, a comment about a show we both watched, a question about whether I'd tried the new coffee place down the street. I told myself it was friendly. I told myself not to read into it. I read into it anyway. The first time we spent time alone, it wasn't planned. Marianne had asked if I could help her pick up groceries. Ethan offered to drive. We sat in the car, the radio low, conversation easy. At the store, we argued playfully about brands. "You always buy the expensive version," I accused. "It tastes better," he replied. "You don't know that." "I do, trust me." Trust. Another heavy word. After we loaded the bags into the trunk, he didn't start the car right away. "You don't talk about your family much," he said, carefully. I stared out the window. They're not really part of my life anymore. He waited. I exhaled slowly. "They don't like tension," I said, "and apparently, I am tension." He frowned. "That doesn't sound right." I shrugged. "It's efficient." He turned toward me fully. "That's not love," he said. I laughed sharply. "You don't know them." "You're right," he said, "but I know you, and you're not the problem." Something inside me resisted. "That's easy to say," I replied. "You haven't had to live with me." He smiled slightly. "I'm not afraid of that." That scared me. Not because I didn't want him to be right, because I wanted him to be wrong. Wanting him meant risking something, and risk had always come with consequences. The night he kissed me, it wasn't dramatic. No build-up, no confession. We were washing dishes together after dinner. Marianne and George had gone for a walk. The house was quiet. He handed me a towel. Our fingers brushed. I looked up. He didn't lean in right away. He waited. I could have stepped back. I didn't. The kiss was gentle, questioning. He pulled away first. "Tell me if that's not okay," he said immediately. I swallowed. "It's okay," I said. "I'm just scared." He nodded. "Me too." That honesty steadied me. Dating Ethan was unlike anything I'd experienced. There were no games, no emotional roller coasters, no punishment for honesty. If something bothered me, we talked about it. If I needed space, he didn't disappear. If I pulled away, he didn't chase or guilt me. He stayed where he was, available, present. That consistency unsettled me more than chaos ever had. One evening, months later, I found myself sitting on Marianne's porch with her, watching the garden settle into dusk. She poured tea and handed me a mug. "You seem lighter," she said. I considered that. "I think I am." She smiled. "Ethan helps." I stiffened slightly. She noticed. "I don't mean that he fixes you," she added quickly. "Just that he sees you." I nodded. "That's new for me." She studied me for a moment. "You know," she said, "I spent years as a family counselor." I looked at her in surprise. "That explains a lot," I said. She laughed. It does, and it also means I recognize certain patterns. My stomach tightened. You're waiting for the other shoe, she said gently. I didn't deny it. She continued. You've been taught that love comes with conditions, that safety is temporary. I stared into my tea. What if that's all I know how to handle? I asked. She reached over and squeezed my hand. Then you learn something new, she said, at your pace. She paused, then added casually, there are ways people make chosen family permanent, not just emotionally. I looked at her. What do you mean? She smiled, soft and unreadable. Just something to think about. She changed the subject, but her words stayed. That night, I lay awake next to Ethan, listening to his breathing. Chosen family. Permanent. My chest felt tight. I had spent my entire life being removable. The idea that someone might choose me, legally, deliberately, without obligation, it felt impossible. It felt dangerous. It felt like hope. And hope had always been the riskiest thing of all. Ethan proposed on a random Tuesday. Not on a holiday, not during a fancy dinner, just a Tuesday. We were walking home from the little bookstore near the park, the one Marianne loved because it still smelled like paper and dust and patience. It had started to drizzle. I was complaining about my umbrella flipping inside out. Ethan stopped under an awning, reached into his coat pocket, and said, I don't want you spending the rest of your life wondering if you're allowed to belong. I blinked. What? His hands were shaking. He laughed once, breathless, like he couldn't believe he was doing it either. Claire, he said, I want to choose you every day, out loud, on purpose. Then he opened the ring box. The street noise faded in my ears, not because it got quiet, but because my brain narrowed down to one point. I stared at the ring like it was a trick. A part of me waited for the punchline. There wasn't one. Yes, I whispered, before he could even finish the question. Yes. He slid the ring onto my finger like he was sealing something fragile and sacred. And then, out of nowhere, I started laughing and crying at the same time because my body didn't know how to hold joy without bracing for impact. Wedding planning should have been simple. We weren't trying to impress anyone. No giant venue, no fireworks. Just something warm, something honest. Marianne cried the first time I said the words wedding date out loud. George pretended he wasn't emotional and then disappeared into the garage for an hour. Ethan's sister offered to help with flowers. Everything felt real. And then I opened the invitation draft. A clean design, elegant script, and one line that stopped my breathing. Parents of the bride. I stared at it for a long time, like the words might rearrange themselves if I waited. They didn't. My biological parents hadn't spoken to me in over a year. Not a birthday text, not a, how are you? Not even a passive-aggressive holiday card. I couldn't print their names like a trophy they didn't earn. But leaving it blank felt like an amputation. So I did what I always did when I was overwhelmed. I cleaned. I wiped down counters that were already clean. I rearranged a bookshelf. I folded a blanket 3 times. Ethan found me standing in the kitchen, holding a stack of invitation samples like they were dangerous. What's wrong? He asked. I tried to speak. Nothing came out. He stepped closer, looked at the paper, and understood immediately. He didn't say, but they're your parents. He didn't say, maybe invite them anyway. He just said, what do you want it to say? My throat tightened. I don't know, I admitted. I want it to be true. Ethan nodded. Okay, then we make it true. That Sunday, after dinner, I stayed behind to help Marianne clear the table. The dishwasher hummed. George argued with the TV like it could hear him. Marianne dried a plate slowly and watched me the way she always did when she knew something was eating me alive. "You're thinking about the invitation," she said. I froze. "How do you—" "You start organizing things you don't need to organize," she replied. "It's your tell." I laughed weakly. Marianne set the plate down and leaned against the counter. "Come sit," she said. We sat at the kitchen table, the kind of table that held decades of meals and arguments and forgiveness. Marianne folded her hands. "There are a lot of ways to handle that line," she said gently. "You could leave it blank. You could write, 'with love,' and avoid names." I nodded. "But," she continued, her voice quieter, "you deserve something better than a workaround." My eyes burned. "I don't know what I deserve," I said, and hated how honest it sounded. Marianne reached across the table and took my hand. "Claire," she said, "you've been our family for a long time now." I swallowed. She held my gaze. "You remember what I hinted at before," she said, "about making chosen family permanent." My heart started beating too fast. "You mean legally?" She nodded once. "Adult adoption," she said, "if you want it. If it would bring you peace." The words landed like a door opening in a hallway I didn't know existed. I stared at her, searching for the joke. There wasn't one. George, who had been pretending to watch TV, turned down the volume and looked over. "We've talked about it," he said simply. I blinked. "You have?" Marianne squeezed my hand. "We didn't want to pressure you," she said. "But yes, we've talked about it." My mouth opened, closed. I felt 12 years old again, asking for something and expecting punishment. "What would that even mean?" I whispered. Marianne's voice stayed steady. "It means you become our daughter," she said. "On paper and in life. New legal relationship, next of kin, the whole thing." My vision blurred. "That's a lot," I managed. "It is," she agreed. "So you don't have to decide tonight." George's voice softened. "But if you want a family that can't erase you with a phone call," he said, "we want to be that." I went home with Ethan and sat on our couch holding a mug of tea I never drank. Ethan sat beside me, not touching me at first. He knew better than to crowd my emotions. Finally, he asked, "How do you feel?" I stared at the ring on my finger. "I feel—" My voice shook. "Like it's too good to be real." Ethan nodded. "Yeah." "And I feel guilty," I added. "For what?" "For wanting it," I whispered. "For letting go of my biological parents." Ethan's jaw tightened slightly, then relaxed. "You're not letting go of them," he said. "They let go of you. You're just stopping yourself from falling after them." That sentence hit me hard. I covered my face with my hands and cried quietly, the kind of cry that feels like finally unclenching a fist you didn't realize you were making. The adoption process took months. Paperwork, appointments, a courthouse that smelled like old carpet and tired coffee. Marianne insisted I come over the night before we filed anything. She made soup and set out bread, like feeding me was her way of blessing the decision. George sat with us at the table, serious now. "Are you sure?" he asked me gently, not because he doubted me, but because he respected the weight of it. I swallowed. "I'm scared," I admitted, "but Yes, I'm sure. Marianne smiled, eyes shining. Good, she said. Then we do it the right way. No shame, no secrecy. At the courthouse, the clerk reviewed our paperwork like it was routine. But it didn't feel routine. It felt like rewriting my life. I signed my name on a line and watched the ink dry. Claire Donovan. Soon to be something else. When we left, Marianne kissed my forehead in the parking lot, not caring who saw. You're doing brave things, she murmured. We didn't post about it online. We didn't announce it. We just lived it. And then, one afternoon, my phone buzzed with a number I hadn't seen in a long time. Ryan. I stared at the screen like it was radioactive. It rang until voicemail. I didn't listen. A minute later, a text arrived. Mom says you're engaged. Is that true? My stomach tightened. How did he even know? Then another text. She's upset you didn't tell her. Dad, too. I laughed once, sharp and humorless. Upset. As if they had been waiting patiently for my update, not actively ignoring my existence. Ethan watched my face. What? He asked. My brother, I said, showing him the screen. He found out. Ethan's expression hardened. How? I don't know, I admitted. But they always find out when it matters. That night, my phone rang again. Unknown number. I let it go. Then a voicemail notification. I hesitated, pressed play. My mother's voice filled the room like a ghost stepping back into a house she'd abandoned. Claire, this is ridiculous, she said, like we'd spoken yesterday. Call me back. We're your family. I listened to the whole thing once, then I deleted it. Ethan reached for my hand. What do you want to do? He asked quietly. I stared at the blank screen, and I said the truest sentence I'd ever said about them. Nothing. Ethan nodded. You don't owe them access, he said. No, I replied. I don't. But even as I said it, I knew. This wasn't over. Not with my family. Not with people who hated losing control. The morning of the wedding was quiet. Not the nervous chaos I'd expected. No racing heart, no panic. Just a strange, steady calm. I stood in the small guest room at Marianne and George's house while Marianne adjusted my dress. Her hands careful, practiced, like this was something she'd always known how to do. You look beautiful, she said softly. I looked at my reflection, not because of the dress, because of the woman inside it. I didn't look like someone bracing for impact. I looked like someone who had already survived. On the dresser beside me lay the wedding program. I picked it up and read the line one more time. Parents of the bride, George and Marianne Harper. Below it, in smaller print, the family who chose her. My chest tightened. Marianne noticed. You okay? She asked. I nodded. I just never thought I'd see that written down. She smiled and kissed my cheek. You earned every letter of it. We'd hired security, quietly. Not because I wanted drama, because I wanted peace. After my mother showed up at my apartment months earlier, demanding explanations like I owed her something, I'd stopped pretending boundaries were optional. I told myself they wouldn't come. I told myself they wouldn't dare. But hope had taught me to prepare. The ceremony itself was perfect. Ethan waiting at the end of the aisle, eyes bright, hands steady. George walking me forward, his arms solid, grounding. When Ethan took my hands, the world narrowed again. This time, not to fear, to choice. When the officiant said, "You may kiss the bride," applause broke out like a release. I exhaled fully for the first time all day. The reception was already warm and loud when the security guard found me. He leaned in close, professional. "Mrs. Harper," he said, "there are 2 people at the entrance claiming to be your parents." The words landed without shock, just confirmation. Ethan's hand tightened around mine. "Do you want me to handle it?" he asked. I shook my head. "No," I said. "This is mine." The guard waited. "Let them in," I said, "but seat them in the back." He nodded and walked away. Ethan searched my face. "You're sure?" I nodded again. They should see. They arrived just as the MC tapped the microphone. Perfect timing. My mother wore a bright dress, too formal for the setting, like she was auditioning for forgiveness. My father trailed behind her, shoulders slightly hunched. They scanned the room, smiling like they belonged, like they were expected. They weren't. The MC cleared his throat. "Ladies and gentlemen, before we continue," he said, "please join me in welcoming the parents of the bride." My mother straightened. I watched it happen, the posture, the anticipation. Then he said the names. "George and Marianne Harper." The room erupted in applause. George and Marianne stood, smiling, waving. Someone whistled. Cameras flashed. And in the back of the room, my mother's face drained of color. Confusion came first, then disbelief, then understanding. She grabbed my father's arm. "What did he just say?" she hissed. My father didn't answer. She pushed through the crowd. He followed reluctantly. She stopped in front of me, eyes wild. "Who are those people?" she demanded. I met her gaze calmly. "My parents." Her mouth opened, closed. "That's not funny." "I'm not joking." My father stared at the floor. "You can't just replace us," she said, voice shaking now. "I didn't," I replied evenly. "You left the position open." Her voice rose. "I'm your mother." I lifted my hand slightly, letting the ring catch the light. "Not legally," I said. "Not anymore." "Not anymore." A hush fell over the nearest tables. My mother looked around, suddenly aware of the audience. "This is humiliating," she whispered. I didn't raise my voice. "Then leave." For a moment, I thought that would be the end. But then my father spoke. "Claire?" His voice cracked. I turned toward him. I really looked at him. He looked older than I remembered, smaller. "I'm sorry," he said. "I should have done better." The words I'd waited decades to hear. They landed quietly. I nodded once. "I know," I said. "Not forgiveness, recognition." My mother rounded on him. "What are you doing?" she snapped. He didn't answer. Marianne stepped forward then, placing a hand on my arm. George moved beside her. My mother glared at them. "You stole my daughter." Marianne's voice stayed calm. "No," she said. "We didn't steal anything." George spoke next, his tone steady but firm. "You gave her away." Silence. He continued. 5 years ago, she sat alone on Christmas Eve because you told her not to come home. My wife invited her to our table. That's all we did." My mother opened her mouth. Nothing came out. "This is our daughter's wedding," George said, "and you don't get to ruin it." He nodded to security. They stepped forward. As they were escorted out, my mother turned back once. For a second, I saw something like regret, or maybe just shock at consequences. I didn't chase it. I didn't follow. I turned back to my husband. The rest of the night was joy. Real joy. Dancing, laughter, Cake cut crookedly and eaten anyway. No ghosts at the table. No fear in my chest. The messages started the next morning. Cousins I barely knew. Aunts with opinions. Family is family. I deleted them without responding. Then one message stopped me. My aunt, my father's sister. "I'm proud of you," she wrote. "You deserved better." I cried once, quietly. And then I felt done. A year later, I sat at Marianne and George's table again. Different holiday, same warmth. A baby monitor hummed softly nearby. Ethan squeezed my knee under the table. I looked around, at my family, the one who chose me, and finally, fully, completely, without conditions, I belonged. If you're watching this and you've ever been told you were too much, too difficult, too dramatic, hear this. You weren't. You were just asking to be loved fairly. You deserve a family that doesn't erase you to keep the peace. And if you have to build it yourself, that's not revenge. That's survival. That's choosing yourself.